𝗔𝗯cie 𝗟𝗶𝗲𝗛𝗓 𝗋𝗋𝗋. This is World Soils Day, December the 5th, and thank you so much to everyone for joining us in celebrating our most precious natural resource on this Friday the 5th. My name is 𝗟𝗶𝗲𝗛𝗓. I'm the president of the New Zealand Society of Soil Science, and I'll be your host for today's link seminar. We'll start with some housekeeping. Please add any question you may have with the Q&A form, not the chat. And please ask those questions in advance if you can. Don't wait until the speaker is finished. It will make our life easier to sort of sort them out. We'll do our best to answer all of them. If we don't have enough time to answer all questions, we'll try and address the rest offline. So hopefully we can get back to you on this. And finally, final point of housekeeping, we will share the recording of this seminar on our website, so check it out. Next slide, please. Oh, we need the next. Can we have the next slide? Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I got it now. So, well, oh, sorry. Can we go one back? No, sorry, I'm having a bit of an issue on my hand. No, that's all right. We're back on where we were. So World Soil Day has been observed since 2014, so it's quite recent. And December the 5th has been chosen for quite a specific reason, for acknowledging the late King of Thailand, who was someone very instrumental to promote soils. And I think it really speaks and demonstrates of how hard it's been to properly value our soil resource. So this year's theme for World Soil Day is Healthy Soils for Healthy Cities. This is quite timely in the current New Zealand policy landscape, with many sort of questions around urban encroachments on high-class land, emerging ideas on sponge cities, etc. Next slide, please. And and it's also, can I get the next slide, please?
We're on urban soils now. There must be a bit of a delay, sorry.
Yes. So anyway, I can speak to the next slide. It will appear shortly. It's also quite timely because our colleagues at the Bioeconomy Science Institute and Mana Whenua have just published a page dedicated to urban soils. So make sure to check it out. So the one of the sort of common visuals I've used over the years to look at this is to show how the primary sector in particular has always been very mindful of the value of soil, especially in the context of food production. So we've got this famous quote, despite all of our accomplishments, we owe our existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. So a very strong sort of message about how soil is directly impacting food security. Next slide, please. But I'd argue that there's more reason to care of all soils than just food production, though. And if you, like me, enjoy a bit of a drive around the fantastic landscape New Zealand has to offer, that's probably something that will resonate with you as you look at those sort of rod cutting, etc. And I think soils in themselves and by themselves are beautiful. They are inspiring. And an example of that is this wonderful painting and poem from our late Dr. Alan Hewitt. So soils are really tightly weaved with who we are beyond the services they provide. Next slide, please. Now, research has sort of tried to format that, to show us that all these different functions of soils impact us greatly as humans in many ways. So we've got most of our food that's really derived from soil. If you think about what you've had for your breakfast, I think up to sort of 95 to 98% of human food is derived from soils, produced on soil. Soil is also home to almost 60% of the Earth's species, huge role in biodiversity. And it's also the largest terrestrial reservoir of carbon. But on the flip side, not most of the soil, but a third of those soils globally are degrading, and it can take a lot of time to produce just a few inches of soil. So today, let's take a step back and look at how we can value the soil resource adequately, and what are the research priorities for New Zealand as we consider this variety of services that can be provided by soil. So I invite now Dr. Paul Mudge from the Bioeconomy Science Institute Paul is a group principal researcher in the land and the land resource and climate change group. Paul, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Porongia te manga irunei takunaka, ko waipa te awa e mahi nei aku maharahara. No Aotearoa ahau, e mihi ana ki no tohu o nihi o 𝗟𝗶𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏 e noho nei au, ko Mudge 𝗟𝗶𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏. So, I'm Waikato born and bred, and before I became a soil scientist, I was a farmer here on these beautiful elephanic soils in the headwaters of the Waipa River. It's a great place to farm, and also a great place if you're a keen trout fisherman like I am. I'm actually still farming on the same soil type near Hamilton, but it's on a tiny scale. I've only got 13 sheep, a couple of cattle, an orchard, and a big veggie garden that rotates around as part of my pasture renewal program. So my focus today is on the title there, Raising Soil's Profile and Restarting the Conversation on Research Priorities for the Future. And I emphasised, I was going to say just starting the conversation. This is a work in progress. And then I thought I have to put restarting because there's been some great work done on this in the past. And I'm going to touch on that soon. I just want to acknowledge that a lot of people have contributed thoughts in the background to this presentation, not space to list them all here. And I just used this photo here on the title slide because it represents a whole range of different land uses. Here on the left is the edge of a large native reserve. It's got patches of forestry and scattered native and exotic trees across the landscape. This very striking area of cropping. One of the things that's missing from this is an urban environment, as Pierre mentioned earlier. Soils underpin all of these ecosystems, yet in New Zealand, they're largely unseen. They're generally covered in lush vegetation because we get lots of rain, and we only get glimpses of them when they're cultivated, or as Pierre mentioned, from roadside cuttings, or maybe some slip scars, or perhaps if you're working in the garden. So soils, really important for all ecosystems, but largely unseen. So soil is often physically out of sight and out of mind, but it actually can also be a bit hidden in, say, government or industry policies or strategies. It's very well known we've got a national policy statement for freshwater management. Also pretty well known that we've got a national policy statement for biodiversity. And I wasn't aware of it, but when I did a look, we've actually got a New Zealand coastal policy statement that goes way back to 2010. Recently, we did get the national policy statement for highly productive land, which was a great step forward. But this actually only covers 14% of New Zealand, so a relatively small area. And this actually might reduce further if that is amended to only include land use capability classes 1 and 2. In contrast, internationally, there's quite a lot of work in this space where momentum is gaining around raising the profile of soils, and then actually it's leading through to action on the ground. Probably obviously the closest example is Australia has a pretty comprehensive national soil strategy, and they don't just have a strategy, but they've got a detailed document after that, an action plan. Also, there's the EU soil strategy, which is pretty big and comprehensive, and just recently there's an EU soil monitoring directive that has come out around how to measure and monitor soils across the EU. So soil is the nexus of many of the challenges and opportunities that we're facing as a nation. And we don't want to get left behind other countries. And good soil stewardship is likely to become increasingly important for market access going forward. So to raise the profile of soil, the value of soil needs to be clearly articulated. Dean Strong and others recently did some interesting work related to how soils are valued in New Zealand here. And they looked at it through kind of, I guess, 3 different lenses, which they termed that, well, it was based on another framework, but the intrinsic value of soil. So it's protecting soil for soil's sake. Then there's the relational value of soil. So that's people's relationship with soil, and Māori in particular have a strong relationship with soil through whakapapa descriptions. And then there's the instrumental value of soil, and that's what soil does for us. And that is by far the area where there is the most research, the most work, where people have focused in on this area. And I'm actually going to perpetuate that by now providing some examples that are more focused on the value of soil and what soil does for us. But hopefully, going forward further in this work, we'll be able to expand on some of the other areas. So the value of soil. In New Zealand, they underpin close to 60 billion per annum in primary sector export earnings. So this is largely land-based, but we do know that clearly what happens on the land, how we manage our soils, also then has downstream implications on freshwater ecosystems and also marine, which are also important for recreation, but also economically. And then soils are also, they are the foundation for that really wide range of terrestrial landscapes that we have, and then our unique flora and fauna. So the plants form because of the soils, but some of the plants also influence the formation of the soils. And these unique landscapes, what makes Aotearoa a highly desirable tourist destination, and that generates an additional 17 billion in direct value added to the economy. And just a slightly different take, the value of soil information. There was some recent work that was done that puts the direct value of SMAP, so that's the National Digital Soil Map, at about $55 million per annum. There's also some costs associated with soil degradation. And I've just got an example slide here, which is from Andrew Neverman, focused on erosion. So we lose a lot of soil from hills across New Zealand, and it's actually high by global standards. So 10 times the global average, and it's amazing that little old New Zealand produces 1.7% of all the sediment delivered to the oceans globally. And this is estimated to cost $100 million in reduced primary production. And what's interesting, there's been some work done on the value of soil after landslides, and it's decreased by 65%. And there's been some work done that it takes like 3+ generations to recover after that. And it may not never recover back to its original capacity within human life frame times. And so that's just the direct production side of things. And then we've got recent history of Cyclone Gabriel. There's all the infrastructure damage of that sediment going and damaging the bridges and all sorts that we've seen. And then that's not even including the impacts of degraded water quality as well. Oh, wrong way. So just now moving on to looking at the research priorities. And again, I just want to emphasize that we're wanting to start the discussion here. And the project that we've got, it's an internally funded project, and the title is He Taonga Te Whenua, Research Priorities to Future-Proof Aotearoa's Living Soil Systems. And there's kind of 3 main objectives. And the first one is what I've already really talked about, is talking about the value and contribution of soils to Aotearoa. We want to do some more work on that and doing that clearly. And then we want to really focus in on what are the research priorities to help future-proof our precious soil resources. And then the final one is trying to inform a pathway to a more coordinated, long-term, cross-sector national soil research effort. Why now? So there's a few reasons why we thought now was a good time. We're obviously going through a science system reform. We've recently formed the Bioeconomy Science Institute, And that's a great opportunity where we're actually getting a bigger critical mass of soil scientists together. And then there's wider reforms as well. There's also a lot going on in the resource management system reset at present. And then the other point that I'd make, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, is it's gone very fast, but it's 10 years on from some work in this space by 𝗟𝗶H et al. And again, I just want to emphasize here that this is a work in progress and we're really keen to get input from others, and what I'm presenting is just some initial thinking. So as I mentioned, the great work that was led by Alison was called Future Requirements for Soil Management in New Zealand, completed 10 years ago. And I'm just going to chuck up some very abbreviated recommendations. There were 9, I've got 5 here, and they've been abbreviated. One of the things they called for was the establishment of a national soil management group to develop a national soil strategy. Then the second one is profile the importance of land and soil to the New Zealand economy and society. And we've done a little bit of that today. And then there's another one, which is looking at the foresight exercise. So looking at the risks, potentially climate change and other things that might impact on soils and then the economy and the environment. And then they recommended 10 years ago that we undertake a national prioritisation of soil research to guide investment in research and development. And that's what we're trying to do in this project. And then there's a final one there is around a national suite of underpinning soil and land resource information. So there's a great resource if anyone wants to dig in and read that. So I've got 3 slides here on research priorities, and I've kind of grouped them into 3 different areas. The first one I've put is foundational data sets and systems. And I think there's a real opportunity here that we could do some more harmonisation of national to regional scale soil monitoring efforts. I've got an example here on the right hand side is a national soil carbon benchmarking and monitoring system for agricultural land that I'm leading with 𝗔𝗯cie 𝗟𝗶H. And this is I think a great initiative, but hey, I think there's an opportunity here to link this better with the soil quality, state of the environment reporting and monitoring done by regional councils. And then there's also the opportunity to link them, not just thinking soils, but linking it with biodiversity monitoring, because we get the best value when we can bring all this information together in a coordinated way. And I've put a sub point here around maintenance or potentially establishment of some new long-term trials. Maybe not across the whole country, but we've lost quite a lot of our long-term trials, and we've got some really good insights from those over the years. And what we need to pick the key ones and make sure we maintain those. Another one I've got here is around just storing our data, archive samples, making them accessible for current and future generations. We've done a big amount of work recently working with Pierre. He's been tearing his hair out, trying to consolidate a whole lot of the soil carbon data sets, and across New Zealand that have been collected over many decades. It's actually a really big job, and have all been done in slightly different ways. If we could kind of harmonise how we do that, we'd be way more efficient in how we can analyse and use and share that information. Very similar around the spatial layers of soil information. We've kind of got some really good stuff there, and I think that there's opportunities to improve on that. And another one in this kind of foundational space is, I think there's obviously getting measurements everywhere is very expensive. Reliable models will also be important to help us with scenarios into the future. Just the second group I've got is some research gaps that we know need filling. We really need some work on quantitatively linking of soil properties that we measure to the functions and then to environmental outcomes and financial outcomes. And someone in the primary sector have really been asking for that. I think there's a gap around getting just consistent methods for quantifying soil biological health. And then there's some great work that Garth Harmsworth and others have done around Māori and soil health. But a key message that's come out of that is there needs to be more inclusion of Māori in planning and decision making related to soil stewardship. And then a clear one that we know is coming and is happening is the implications of climate change on soils in a range of different ways. And finally, what is over the horizon? We don't want to just think about the things that are here and now, but there's a lot of change in the systems. There's a lot of emerging technologies that could be applied to soil. There already are, but that's potentially going to be a step change going forward as well. There's been discussion around emerging contaminants, or a phrase I just heard the other day was, or contaminants of emerging importance. There's a workshop on microplastics coming up next calendar year, I understand. Another one is tipping points. It's like with climate change and things like that, if we, and then the intersection with land use and management, if we push our soils, could they get to a point where they'll actually degrade more quickly? And then another thing that there's been increased interest in internationally and in New Zealand is more direct linking through soils through to public health outcomes. And this could be via the direct contact with the soil or indirectly via the food that we eat. So that is just an incredibly quick snapshot. And what I really want to emphasize again, it's a work in progress. These are some ideas, but we're asking feedback. If you've got any great insights on the value of soil, looking at more dimensions than just the economic that I largely presented here, and also what are the priorities for soil research that we need going forward, and why? What's the evidence for why we need to do more work in these spaces? So please get in touch, reach out via that email, or if you want, chuck as a comment in the Q&A, and we will capture that as a when we download all of that information. So thanks very much, and I'm going to pass back to Pierre.
Kia ora, Paul. Thank you so much for your great presentation. Apologies for my initial IT issues. A couple of things before we go into those Q&A. We have a few more celebration of soils worth putting in your agendas. The Norman Taylor Lecturer is the, so that's the most prestigious award of our New Zealand Soil Science Society. And this year's recipient is Steve Watling. And Steve will be giving his lecture in Hamilton, Lincoln, and Palms North over the next while. December for Hamilton and Lincoln, and it will be just before the FLRC conference at Massey in Palms North. Do try and attend. These are free and public events, so make sure you attend the Norman Taylor lecture this year if you can. Second item, yours truly will be on the SciGest podcast talking about soils and what soils there is. So if you're into podcast, all the sort of you can get that through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, of your preferred podcast platform, or directly through the SciGest website, which is the Bioeconomy Science Institute main podcast service. So yeah, see you there if you are interested in this. Now, a few announcements from me as well. We will have a rest and go to the beach over Christmas. The No Link seminar at the end of December. The next Link seminar is scheduled for the 27th of January. It will be with Pax Dalman-Brown, who is a principal researcher in economics. So make sure you tune in early next year for the next Link seminar. Now, we will both try and answer your questions now for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Paul with his sort of BSI hat on, and myself with the NZSSS hat on. So keep those questions coming. So I'll start with a question from Merv. We said, I don't disagree on more soil research required, but we have a lot of science that is not being implemented. There's no effective way in Aotearoa to get that science out to farmers. I guess I can take this one, Paul, but feel free to chip in. I think the point that Merv is making is like science in itself isn't enough. We've got, on one hand, people start trying to push the bleeding edge of science, pushing our knowledge, pushing our technology as well, and enabling new things. There's the science to policy interface, which is also equally important. And indeed, there's a whole bringing science to farmer, bringing science to land manager, bringing science to regional councils as well. So my perspective from an 𝗟𝗶𝗶 perspective is we shouldn't have to choose between those things. And I think a successful piece of science do all three, right? So that's about creating new knowledge, but also making sure this can be considered in policy and implemented by people who are within the ground. Paul, you have, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to that. I think that's a very good point, and it's something that Susie Greenhow has very much emphasized, and she's actually leading a MB program called Moving the Middle, which is about how do you move that kind of middle 60% of farmers, land stewards into better environmental performance, because it isn't just about the information. And so, yeah, we're aware of that, and we do have some engaging a little bit with some of the social researchers around how we do that. So I think that's a really good point, and we do need to think about that.
Yeah, and good point of discussion from Meridoc here, saying that challenge deserves its own specific focus as traditional extension alone has limited success. Yeah, good point. Joe Sariak, based on your slide about resource management, national direction, and with reform of the RMA likely to be announced next week, what in your mind needs to be strengthened in the regulatory system to better protect the health and values of soil?
Oh, okay, that's a big question.
Big question.
I do think, and you probably could speak to this almost better than me, Pierre, but I do think that highly productive land is really important to look after. It's like New Zealand, we think, yeah, we've got this lovely country, it's great, but we actually don't have that much highly productive land. If you think about New Zealand and even the agricultural areas, a lot of it is hill country. It's actually not that versatile for efficient production of like crops in particular. So I think it's critical that we do look after that land because it is the most efficient way to produce a lot of food. And it's got lots of versatility, that it can be used for crops, it can be used for horticulture. And as soon as we put it under houses, then it's gone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Paul. And I think that's really about really making sure that resource is protected for everyone. And that includes as well, economic activities, right? So we are a country that depends a lot on our exports, exporting a lot of food products. These exports need to be self-cherished, and their production really depends on the quality of our soil. So we need to make sure we get the finger on the pulse of this resource, because it really underpins a large part of our economy. So it's really about knowing where you are at in terms of that resource and its health. We've got a couple of questions. I might clump them. We got Kimber Kennedy and Michael Tiemann, and I think they're both asking about those metrics. So I think Kimber says it's a focus on the economic metrics to gain traction and attention to SWARE implementation and uptake. So I think she's making the point that a lot of it has to do with economic growth. And Michael says that we need reliable nature-centric reporting. We need a nature-centric, science-based framework to measure soil health, productivity, resilience, etc. Do you want to speak to that, Paul, and how those sort of metrics should embody maybe more than just economic return?
Oh yeah, I see the, I've just actually got that one now. Yeah, I think I did allude to that we do need to be broader than the current focus that we've had, which is pretty focused on, I guess, economics, and trying to have a much more holistic view and metrics, and definitely working with Ani, who's a Kahotu researcher here. She's really pushing that holistic view and trying to not just narrow it down to food and fiber production and economics, but much broader and view of soils, and then really emphasizing as well the connections to other ecosystems and like the water, and looking at it in a much more holistic way. The challenge there though comes to one of the research priorities that I put up was, how do we make that linking so that we can, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. It's like, we know that we can degrade soils, but when, and then also the timeframes. but how long will they keep performing until they may then not?
Thanks, Paul. We've got a quick question from the chat. Perhaps an additional national environmental monitoring standard, NEMS, could provide a mechanism to a greater national harmonization of data. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that just getting consistency of how we do things from study design, where we sample, through to how we sample, through to how we process and how we store that data, and getting consistency across that would just be incredibly useful and increase efficiencies all around, because there is just so many times where you're like, oh, it wasn't done in the same way. Is that the same metric? Is it comparable? I think doing some of that would be incredibly useful. And then the other point that I didn't say in there was actually think about it. Yes, we're going here and we're going to measure soils, and we're thinking about soils, but going, wait a minute, what about general biodiversity above and below ground? And we've also had discussions across the BSI, like facial eczema. Like, can we actually make some measurements at the same sites, and when we can weave all of these things together, and it provides a much richer story than if you're just going, one person's going and you're measuring soils and another one's measuring the vegetation. So I think there's a real opportunity there.
Thanks, Paul. We're already running out of time. We might just do a couple more. I'm just going to clump a few together. There's Gerald Rees, who says, what is the New Zealand capability level in soils? And Cherry Dune asking, research gap, opportunities for master and PhD students to kick off perhaps. Are you proactively building relationship with universities so students can research highly relevant subject needed by the country?
I would say that there are good relationships with, lots of the different universities, and there's a lot of co-supervision of students between the university and the Bioeconomy Science Institute people. And yeah, we specifically try and do that where we can. Could we improve it? Potentially, but I think that it's reasonably strong.
Yeah, and from a society perspective, that's something we're quite passionate about. I think we want to make sure that capability is maintained, and it's a battle. And just want to point out that can bring new initiatives. One that comes to mind is soil judging competition. So something we did observe over the years is less and less sort of practical work, less soil science taught at universities, and a way to re-energize this. And that's been led by Carol Smith and Kirsten Dice, is the organization of soil judging competitions. We had one in Rotorua last year, which was very successful, both for students, but also for professionals to sort of upskill in front of a soil pit and sort of refresh those field skills. So we can think a little bit differently also about those relationships with universities and be a bit creative and make sure we get those skills out there for people that have to manage land. So we are over time now. I just got a couple of questions that should be pretty quick to answer, and we may close after that. We've got questions around the harmonization of the data and whether those will be open access. Do you have a comment on that? I know it's not necessarily a straightforward topic.
I think that one is quite challenging. Ideally, I would say, as a researcher, I would say yes. It actually, a lot of it comes down to what your agreement is with an individual landowner or land steward where you are collecting the data, and whether or not you can share that information. And in some cases, they're happy to go, yes, you can collect data, but I do not want data for my block of land with a GPS point saying that is out there in the public. And what we're doing around some of that is then you produce derived layers that then it can be shared broadly because it's not linked to a specific place, although information from that point will influence the accuracy of those layers. I think that that's a broader discussion than just the research community, and it goes through to government as well, I think, around how we do that. And I would just add that to do that, you ideally need to get a landowner to sign off that, yes, you can share this data and you can share it openly, basically under Creative Commons. And if we go to 500 sites across the country and ask to do that, it's very difficult. They'll just go, no, that's too hard. A lot of them are happy. They'll let you go on the land and do the thing, what the purposes are. It won't be shared more broadly, but they're not happy to sign off a form and say, yes, that can be shared with basically anyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. So we are 5 minutes over, so I may close the seminar now. Thank you, everyone, so much for attending. There's quite a few questions we didn't address and some very good points in there. We'll try to address them offline. And also for those who had sort of those points I wanted to make, etc., feel free to email us. And there's a few very interesting initiatives as well in those questions. And that's, yeah, that's really great to hear. So again, have a fantastic World Soils Day, and we will see you on January the 27th for the next Link seminar. Ka kite.
Thanks, everyone. Keen to continue the conversation. Thank you.